Recently, a number of evangelists have sort of put on the table, or they've come forward advocating green causes or environmentalist causes. With that in mind, what do you think of the implication that for many there is a religious imperative towards such environmentalist causes, towards the idea, to put it in phrasing that would be fairly common in America, being a good shepherd of the earth, so to say, would be one phrase that I'm sure our American listeners will be familiar with. What are your thoughts on that sort of situation?
Well, I for one believe that there is such an imperative. Actually, if anything, there's a biblical imperative. What has happened is that it's taken a back seat. And coming back to your question earlier, Aaron, can politics influence religion? Here is another good example. It's many who are now embracing this. It's not because it was hidden someplace in the Bible. It's fairly pervasive, but it has never really been given the kind of privileged status as other topics, biblically speaking, have been given. But now, all of a sudden, as a society, we have become, and I think correctly so, very attentive to not having an anthropocentric attitude towards the environment, but something a little bit more of a biocentric understanding of the world. But that's a fairly common idea in the Bible. So this idea of having that as an imperative, I think, is a great idea. Now, how one approaches that, again, I think becomes a major issue. One who might be steeped in the biblical tradition would certainly be familiar not only with being a good shepherd, but with being a good steward. And there is an imperative that says, you have dominion to take care and to keep. And the concept of keeping, very much the way we think about this, if I said to you, you know what, I need to pop over here, or I need to run an errand, would you keep my backpack, would you keep my laptop for me? I expect that you will protect it. I expect that you will care for it. I expect that you will keep it. I expect that when I come back, it will be in good shape and you have not destroyed it. That's the language that is used in terms of the earth. And so evangelicals and others across the board, I think, ought to embrace this idea and sort of think through how best to do that. I think we have really not done even close to a good job of being good stewards. We just haven't, because it's never been that, sexy of a topic to pursue.
One of the scare tactics that has, I guess, been developed in the last few years with the media is to say that Muslim extremists will try and implement Sharia law within the United States. Now, could you explain to people who may not know what Sharia law is, exactly what Sharia law entails, and if it would even be remotely possible for something like that to happen in the United States? Well,
this is not even a Reader's Digest version of what I'm about to say. In the late 1970s, the early 80s, there was one sort of principle, I would say. There probably were smaller ones, certainly one that was well known. One principle theocracy. And it was Iran, it was Ayatollah Khomeini, and essentially the whole idea of Sharia law, it means that a society is governed by this particular, in this case, Islamic law about how we live lives, about the role of men and women, about education, about politics, all of the above. In other words, religious law, and I'll expand it, religious law becomes the platform, the foundation of all of life within society. Do I think that that's even remotely going to be the case in our society? I don't think so. I think it becomes a code word for fear. It becomes a code word for fear. But you know what? There have been people who have run to become candidates of a particular party in the United States, certainly in recent memory, who actually, for all practical purpose, based on what they were proposing, would turn this nation into theocracy. I don't know of anyone outside of a handful who would want us to be a theocracy. An Islamic nation under Sharia law is a theocracy. So let me answer a question that you haven't asked. I think it's a bad idea. It's a horrible idea across the board, regardless what kind of religious law becomes the blanket to govern all of life. Theocracy is theocracy. If we think that Sharia law is a bad idea for an Islamic nation, any other kind of theocracy, in my view, is really, really seriously troubling. And we've had candidates in the late 1980s who, for all practical purposes, were proposing ideas that would very much come to constitute what a theocracy would be.
We had candidates as recently as this year, actually.
We have candidates this year, but the Reverend Pat Robertson in 1988. We go back and look. It was on the cover, in fact, of Time magazine about religion and politics. I mean, it's there in the open, and unabashedly so. Unabashedly so.
That, to one degree or another, can lead us into the subject of religious extremism, which has certainly become much more of a hot topic in the past decades, but especially since 2001. And with that in mind, how does religious extremism, perhaps as we could say it is most commonly found within the culture of the United States, compare with that found within other cultures throughout the world? Or is a comparison there even a reasonable thing to make?
Yeah, and I'm not sure, but there's clearly religious extremism in any number of nations. Clearly there. But we also have nations that are very sort of wide open, that one might even call secular nations. But within our nation, we have religious extremism. We've heard some of it, in recent months, in this political season, where people have talked about how they're guided to do certain things that will become policy based on what they believe. We have that. But we also have it in places like Iran, clearly. Or we also have it in places with the Taliban in parts of Afghanistan and Pakistan. We have it in India, and we have it in Sri Lanka. We have it in Israel, and we have it in Palestine. It's all over the place. If there is anything that one could say that I would say about this, is that I would say that religious extremism, regardless of what the texture is, what the flavor is destructive. Again, let me put it somewhat differently. If I'm a religious person, I want to be passionate about what I believe. If you're a religious person, I would encourage you to be passionate about what you believe. By the way, I would also encourage you to be passionate about your vocation, about your relationships, about your calling. But I do not want my passion to somehow spill over in me becoming a fanatic. I think religious extremism is simply on the same level as religious fanatics, which is to say, in part, that what I believe has to, at some level, because I believe it's true, I'm so certain, and this is where certitude becomes a devastating indictment. But my certainty is such about what I believe in terms of its truth, that when I tell you about it, I expect that you will subscribe to it and embrace it. And if you don't, I'll just have to do something about it. In other words, religious extremists and fanatics will not leave the other alone until, by the way, they have established deeply what they hold to be true. And we have it. I think all of these major religious traditions at some level, some more than others have it. Some more than others have it.
Does religion complicate American foreign policy and international affairs, or are there things that are much more important than religion with respect to how the United States treats Israel, how it treats Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya and Saudi Arabia and Iran and other countries in the Middle East?
I think there are more important things, to be honest about it. But religion absolutely has become a factor. There's just no getting around it. And so one treads carefully. And if you don't believe me, go and listen again to the transcript of the last debate about foreign policy, which about a third of it was on foreign policy. But if you listen to it, you will see that it is almost, it is so one-sided in one sort of part of the world. I think there is more to foreign policy than religion. But religion absolutely enters in, and because, of course, not to cite September 11, but because of what has really become a part of the public consciousness with regard to Islam, it absolutely enters in.